I didn't know it yet, but that was the last normal day of my life. The last morning I would ever feel safe. The last time I believed my husband loved me. A few hours later, standing barefoot in my kitchen with pasta boiling behind me and rain tapping against the windows, I would read one sentence on his phone that split my life clean in two, before that message and after it. But that morning, I remember the smell first. Warm paper, dust, and cheap coffee. The soft library smell that always made me feel safe, like nothing bad could ever reach me between those shelves. And in the fall of 2023 in Bellevue, just outside Seattle, the trees outside the tall windows were orange and red like they were burning slowly, and every morning I unlocked the front door at 8 sharp, rubbed my aching lower back, and whispered to my son inside my belly, "Just a few more weeks, little one." Because I was 31, 8 months pregnant, moving slower than everyone else, but strangely happy in a quiet, simple way that felt new to me, like life had finally stopped fighting me. My name is Hannah Brooks, I work as a librarian, and for the first time in years I truly believed I was safe, not rich or famous or anything special, just safe, and that was enough, because I had a small house with a white fence, a steady job with kind coworkers, and a husband who used to kiss my forehead every morning before work like I was something precious. Ryan worked at a tech company in Seattle as a project manager, always wearing clean button-down shirts and smelling like mint gum and laundry soap, and lately he had been coming home late, sometimes after 10 or 11, saying there were meetings, deadlines, end-of-year targets, and I never questioned it because a baby was coming and babies cost money, and I told myself he was just being responsible, just being a good father already, and when you love someone you start building excuses for them. Without even noticing, like you're protecting your own heart. Most nights I cooked dinner, saved his plate in the microwave, and fell asleep on the couch with my hand on my stomach while some old TV show played softly in the background, and he would wake me up or carry me to bed when he got home, at least that's what he said, because sometimes I didn't even remember hearing him come in. At the library everyone treated me like I was made of glass. Mrs. Patel wouldn't let me carry heavy book boxes. Teenagers offered me chairs. Old men smiled and asked, "Any day now, huh?" And I would laugh and nod and say, "Soon," while secretly imagining my son's tiny fingers holding mine, imagining Ryan pushing a stroller in the park while I carried coffee and watched them both, sunlight on their faces, just small normal dreams, nothing big, nothing dramatic, just a family that stayed together. Still, somewhere deep inside me there was a strange feeling growing, small and cold like a pebble stuck in my shoe, because Ryan had started turning his phone face down on the table and taking it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom, and when I asked about work he gave short answers like, "Fine," or "Busy," instead of the long stories he used to tell, and the silence between us felt heavier each week. But every time doubt tried to rise up I pushed it away and blamed my pregnancy hormones. Telling myself good wives don't imagine bad things and happy marriages don't fall apart for no reason. That evening the rain tapped softly against the kitchen window, that endless Seattle drizzle that makes everything gray and sleepy. My ankles were swollen and my back hurt while I stirred pasta sauce slowly, and Ryan came home late again looking tired and distracted, kissed my cheek quickly, and said he needed a shower right away, and I watched him walk down the hallway while steam soon filled the bathroom, and that's when I noticed something strange. His phone was still on the kitchen counter. Which almost never happened, and I stared at it longer than I should have, telling myself not to be silly, not to be paranoid, it's just a phone. Hannah, stop acting crazy. But then it started buzzing, once, then twice, then 3 times in a row, the sound too loud in the quiet kitchen, and my heart began to beat so fast it almost hurt, and before I could think I wiped my hands on a towel and looked down at the screen as it lit up. And I didn't mean to read it, I really didn't, but the message preview was right there, impossible to ignore, and it said, "I can't wait until she gives birth. Then we don't have to hide anymore." And under it was a name I had never seen before, Lauren, and in that exact second, with the pasta boiling behind me and my husband in the shower down the hall, something inside me cracked open, because I suddenly understood that my life had just split into 2 parts, the time before this message, and everything that would come after it. For a few seconds I just stood there staring at the screen like my brain had stopped working, like I had forgotten how to read English, because the words made no sense together, they floated in front of my eyes without meaning, and all I could hear was the pasta boiling over and the water hissing on the stove, but my body felt cold, too cold for a warm kitchen, and my hands started shaking so badly that I had to hold the counter to stay standing, and I told myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe it was a joke, maybe it was the wrong number, maybe she wasn't me, maybe I was being dramatic, because pregnant women imagine things, right? Hormones make you crazy, that's what everyone says, that's what Ryan sometimes joked about, so I tried to laugh at myself, but the laugh wouldn't come out. The phone buzzed again in my hand, another message from Lauren, just a heart emoji this time, small and red and innocent looking, and that tiny symbol hurt more than the sentence, because hearts are for love, not jokes, not work meetings, and before I could stop myself my thumb slid across the screen and the phone unlocked since he had never changed the passcode for my birthday, which suddenly felt like the cruelest thing in the world, like he trusted me just enough to never suspect him, and the message thread opened like a door I could never close again. I scrolled up slowly at first, telling myself I would stop, that I didn't really want to know, but my finger kept moving, and the messages went back weeks, then months, and every line felt like a knife sliding under my skin. There were "miss you already" texts, late-night jokes, selfies from his office, pictures of coffee cups together, and then messages about me, about my pregnancy, about our life. Like I wasn't a person but just a problem they needed to solve. I saw one where she wrote, "Does she suspect anything?" And Ryan answered, "No, she trusts me too much," and my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up, because trust had always been the one thing I was proud of. I thought we were that couple, the calm, stable couple that didn't cheat or lie, and now I looked stupid even to myself. Then I found the messages that broke me completely, the ones where they talked about after the baby, about how it would be easier to leave me once I was tired and overwhelmed, how divorce would cost less if they planned it right, how he didn't want to waste money on alimony, like I was some bill or subscription he could cancel, and Lauren wrote, "Once she gives birth, you can finally be free and we can start our real life." And he replied, "Just a little longer, then we don't have to hide anymore." The same sentence from the preview, only now it wasn't just a sentence, it was a plan, a future where I didn't exist. My baby kicked inside me suddenly, hard, like he felt my panic, and I pressed my hand to my belly and whispered, I'm sorry, even though I didn't know what I was apologizing for, maybe for choosing the wrong man to be his father, maybe for not seeing this sooner, maybe for loving someone who was already halfway gone." The shower water was still running down the hall, and that normal everyday sound felt unreal, like the world should have stopped or something should have exploded, but nothing changed. The house looked the same, the lights were still warm, dinner still smelled like tomatoes and garlic, and I realized that the worst moments of your life don't come with music or warning signs, they happen in the middle of ordinary evenings. And if you've ever had a moment like that, where your whole world changed in seconds, quietly, without warning, take a second to like the video or subscribe. It really helps me tell stories like this. And maybe share your story too. I read every comment. I quickly locked the phone and put it back exactly where it had been, trying to make everything look untouched, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he would hear it through the walls, and I wiped my tears with the back of my hand like a child because I didn't want him to see me cry. Not yet. Not before I understood everything, and as I stood there forcing myself to breathe slowly, I felt something change inside me, not strength, not yet, just a deep crack, like the foundation of my life had shifted, and I knew with terrible certainty that even if he came out smiling and kissed me and called me baby like always, nothing would ever feel safe again. I barely remember how I turned off the stove and set the table after that, because my body kept moving like a machine while my mind felt far away, like I was watching myself from the ceiling, and every small sound made me jump, the clink of the fork against the plate, the hum of the fridge, the water still running in the shower down the hall, and I kept thinking, this is crazy, this is my house, my kitchen, my husband is 10 steps away, how can everything feel so unfamiliar all of a sudden? Like I walked into the wrong life by mistake. I touched my belly again and tried to breathe slowly the way my doctor had taught me, in and out, but my chest was tight and my heart wouldn't slow down, because now every memory from the last few months looked different, like someone had changed the color of the past, and I started remembering all the nights Ryan came home late, all the times he smiled at his phone, all the work dinners and last-minute calls. And each one turned into proof instead of coincidence. And I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, stupid for trusting so easily, like I had been the only adult in the room who didn't understand the joke. The shower finally stopped and I heard the bathroom door open, steam drifting into the hallway, and for one wild second I thought about grabbing the phone and throwing it at his face and screaming, asking who Lauren was, asking how long, asking why, but another voice inside me said no, don't explode, don't give him time to lie better, don't show him your cards yet, and I didn't even know where that calm, cold voice came from, because I had always been soft, always the forgiving one, the one who cried first and argued later. He walked into the kitchen wearing sweatpants and a gray t-shirt, hair still wet, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong, and that smile almost broke me more than the messages did, because it looked so normal, so loving, and I realized he must have smiled at me like that after texting her, maybe even minutes after telling her he couldn't wait to be free of me. He kissed my cheek and said, "Something smells good," and I nodded and forced a small smile, praying he couldn't hear the shaking in my voice when I said, "Just pasta," and we sat down at the table like any other married couple, like two actors playing husband and wife in a cheap TV show. While he ate, he talked about work, some project problem, some coworker mistake, and I watched his face carefully, searching for guilt, for fear, for anything, but he looked relaxed, even joking, and that scared me the most, because it meant he had been lying for a long time, long enough for it to feel natural, and I wonder how many times he had texted her while sitting right across from me like this, how many times I had said, "I love you," while he was planning a future without me. I kept hearing that sentence in my head, once she gives birth, like my pregnancy was just a waiting period for him, like I was some obstacle he had to get through, and my hand moved protectively over my belly again, because suddenly it wasn't just about me, it was about my son too, about the fact that his own father was already preparing to walk away. At one point Ryan looked at me and frowned slightly and said, "You're quiet tonight, you okay?" And for a second I almost laughed, because the question felt so absurd, like asking someone if they're okay while their house is on fire, but I just nodded and said I was tired, that the baby was heavy, and he reached over and squeezed my hand, warm and familiar, and I felt my throat close up because the same hand had probably held Lauren's too, and I had to look down at my plate so he wouldn't see the tears forming in my eyes. In that moment I understood something painful and clear, that the man sitting in front of me was both my husband and a stranger at the same time, and that whatever happened next, whatever I decided to do, the simple safe life I thought I had was already gone, replaced by a quiet storm that was just beginning to rise inside me. That night I lay in bed next to Ryan and stared at the ceiling for hours while he slept like a child, breathing slow and deep, one arm thrown over his pillow, and I kept wondering how someone who lied so easily could sleep so peacefully, because my eyes refused to close no matter how tired I felt, and every time I blinked I saw those messages again, bright white letters in the dark, "We don't have to hide anymore," repeating over and over like a cruel song stuck in my head. The room smelled like his shampoo and clean sheets, smells that used to comfort me, but now they made my stomach turn, and I stayed very still so I wouldn't accidentally touch him, because even the thought of his skin against mine felt wrong, like touching something dirty. My son kept moving inside me, slow heavy kicks, and each one reminded me that I couldn't just cry and fall apart. I wasn't alone in my body anymore, I had someone depending on me, someone who didn't deserve this mess, and that thought scared me more than the cheating, because now every decision wasn't just about my heart but about his whole future. Around 3 in the morning I quietly reached for my phone and went to the living room so I wouldn't wake Ryan, and I sat on the couch with only the small lamp on, the house silent except for the ticking clock, and I started thinking back, really thinking, trying to remember when things had changed, and little moments came back to me like pieces of a puzzle I had ignored before, like the time Ryan said he had a team dinner, but came home smelling like a woman's perfume that wasn't mine, or the weekend he said he had to work but turned off his location sharing, or the way he suddenly started going to the gym more and buying new shirts like he was trying to impress someone, and at the time I had been proud of him for taking care of himself, which now felt almost funny in a sad way, like I had helped him look good for another woman. I hated myself for being so trusting, but at the same time I knew this wasn't my fault, because loving your husband shouldn't be a mistake. My mind kept jumping between anger and fear. One minute I wanted to scream at him and break every plate in the kitchen, the next minute I felt small and terrified, wondering how I could raise a baby alone if we separated, how I would pay rent, how I would work with a newborn, and that fear almost made me want to pretend I had never seen the messages, to just close my eyes and stay married and act stupid forever, because sometimes the truth is heavier than lies. I even imagined confronting him and him apologizing and promising to end it, and for a weak second I thought maybe we could fix it, maybe couples survive worse things, maybe I should be strong and forgive, but then I remembered those texts about money and alimony, about waiting until after I gave birth because it would be easier for him, and something inside me hardened, because that wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness, that was planning, that was strategy, like I was an enemy he needed to escape from. Just before dawn, when the sky outside turned gray-blue, I made a quiet decision without saying it out loud, a small promise only to myself, that I would not beg, I would not cry in front of him, and I would not let him decide my future like I was some problem to manage, because if he had already imagined a life without me, then maybe I needed to start imagining one too, even if it scared me, even if I had no idea how to do it. I pressed both hands over my belly and whispered, "It's okay, Noah, Mommy's here," and for the first time since reading those messages, my tears stopped, not because I felt better, but because something colder and stronger was slowly growing inside me, something that felt like survival. The next morning everything looked painfully normal, the kind of normal that makes you feel like you're going crazy, because how could the world stay the same when your life had already fallen apart, and I moved through the kitchen making toast and tea while the sky outside was pale and cloudy, the same soft Seattle gray, and Ryan came in yawning and stretching like any other day, kissed the top of my head, and asked if I slept well, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing at the question, because I hadn't slept at all, I had just lain there next to a stranger wearing my husband's face. I told him I was fine, just uncomfortable because of the pregnancy, and he nodded like that explained everything, like hormones were the answer to every change in me, and that small thought made something click in my head, because suddenly I realized how easy it would be for him to call me emotional or paranoid if I confronted him, how easy it would be for him to twist the story and make me doubt myself, and I promised myself again that I wouldn't rush, I wouldn't give him the chance to prepare a better lie. At the library I tried to act normal, but it felt like I was walking underwater, every sound distant and slow, and while I checked out books and smiled at regular customers, my mind kept replaying the messages over and over, each sentence burning into me deeper, and during my lunch break I sat alone in the staff room with my phone and started doing something I never thought I would do. I searched, divorce lawyer Seattle, like it was just another task on a to-do list, like buying groceries or scheduling a doctor's appointment, and my hands trembled the whole time, because typing that word felt too real, too final. I told myself I was just looking, just gathering information, but when I saw the websites and phone numbers and words like custody, assets, child support, it hit me that this wasn't just about heartbreak, this was legal, financial, messy, and scary, and for a moment I almost closed the page and decided to forget everything, because staying hurt felt easier than starting a war. But then my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, something simple like, "How are my two favorite people today?" with a heart emoji, and I stared at it for a long time, feeling sick, because I knew that same morning he was probably texting Lauren too, maybe calling her babe or miss you, using the same soft words for both of us, copying and pasting love like it was nothing special. And that thought made my chest burn with anger instead of fear, and I realized I didn't want to stay with someone who could split himself in two like that. I deserved better, and my son definitely deserved better, even if better meant small apartments and second-hand furniture and working extra jobs. After work I stopped by the bank before going home and checked my savings, the small amount I had been putting aside during my pregnancy, just in case. Money I once planned to use for baby clothes and a stroller, and seeing that number gave me a tiny bit of strength, because it meant I wasn't completely trapped, it meant I had options, even if they were hard ones. As I drove back through the wet streets, windshield wipers moving back and forth, I realized something slowly and painfully clear. The woman I had been a week ago, the trusting wife who believed every late meeting story, was already gone, and in her place was someone more careful, someone watching and planning, someone who was learning how to survive, and even though that change hurt, it also made me feel a little less helpless, like maybe this story wasn't over yet, like maybe I still had some control left. When I finally parked in front of the house and saw Ryan's car already there, my heart still beat fast, but it wasn't the same blind panic as before, it was something sharper, more focused, like I was walking into a game where only I knew the truth, and as I rested both hands on my belly before getting out, I whispered to Noah, "We're going to be okay, I promise." Not because I was sure, but because for the first time, I was starting to believe I would do whatever it took to make it true. That evening I decided to test him, not in some dramatic movie way, not yelling or throwing things, just small quiet questions, the kind that look innocent but carry weight, and it scared me how calm I sounded while asking them, like I was already becoming someone else, someone more careful and colder than the woman I used to be. Ryan was sitting on the couch with his laptop open, pretending to work, the blue light reflecting on his face, and I brought him tea and sat down slowly because my back hurt and my belly felt heavier than ever, and for a moment we looked like any normal couple, the kind you'd see in a furniture ad, soft lights, quiet house, peaceful life, and I almost hated how perfect it looked from the outside. I asked him, "Are you busy a lot this week too?" And he didn't even look up before saying, "Yeah, crazy deadlines," and the answer came too fast, too automatic, like he had said it 100 times before, and I nodded and forced a small smile, then asked, "Do you ever get tired of working so late?" And he laughed a little and said, "I'm doing it for us, for the baby," and those words hit me hard because they sounded so noble, so loving, and yet I knew they were lies, and I wondered how many times he had used that same excuse while walking out the door to meet her. I watched his face carefully the whole time, the way his eyes moved, the way his fingers tapped his phone when it buzzed, how he tilted the screen away from me without thinking. Small habits that I used to ignore but now looked huge, obvious, almost stupid, like how did I not see this before, and with every secret little movement my trust broke a bit more. At one point his phone lit up and I caught the name Lauren for just half a second before he flipped it over, but that was enough. My stomach dropped like I was on a roller coaster, and I felt the baby kick hard inside me, almost painfully, like my body was reacting before my brain could, and I pressed my lips together so I wouldn't say something I couldn't take back. Later that night, while he was in the bathroom again, I did something I never thought I would do in my life, something that made me feel guilty and strong at the same time. I opened our shared laptop and checked the phone records from our carrier account, because we both had the password saved, and my hands were ice cold while the page loaded, and when it finally did, I saw pages and pages of the same number repeated over and over, late nights, early mornings, long calls, sometimes 40 minutes, sometimes an hour, and there was no more doubt left after that. No space for excuses or misunderstandings, just facts lined up like proof in a courtroom. It wasn't a mistake or a short affair, it was a whole relationship, a second life happening right next to me while I folded baby clothes and picked paint colors for the nursery. I sat there in the dark living room with the screen glowing in front of me and felt something strange settle inside my chest, not sadness this time, not even anger, just clarity, sharp and clean, like cold air in winter, and I realized that the man I married wasn't confused or unhappy or lost, he was simply choosing someone else every single day, and once you see it that clearly, love starts to die very quietly. I closed the laptop, placed it back exactly where it had been, and looked around the house we had built together, the couch we picked, the photos on the wall, the tiny crib waiting in the corner of our bedroom, and instead of feeling comfort, I felt like I was already visiting a place from my past, like none of it belonged to me anymore. When Ryan came out and asked if I was okay, I just nodded and said I was tired, and he wrapped an arm around me and kissed my temple, and I let him, not because I wanted to, but because I needed him to keep thinking everything was normal a little longer, and as he held me I stared straight ahead and thought, you don't know it yet, but you're already losing me, and for the first time since all this started, I wasn't afraid of being alone, I was afraid of staying. A few days later the truth got even worse, like the universe decided that betrayal wasn't complete yet and wanted to press harder on the bruise, and it happened in a way I never expected, not through Ryan, not through Lauren, but through my own family, the two people I trusted almost as much as I trusted him. It was Sunday afternoon and I was at my mom's house for lunch, something we did almost every week, just me, my mom, and my younger sister Emily, sitting around the small wooden table eating soup and talking about baby clothes and names, and for a moment I almost forgot everything, because my mom kept touching my belly and smiling and saying, I can't wait to meet my grandson. And I wanted so badly to stay in that soft warm moment, to be just a daughter and a soon-to-be mother, not a woman. Planning her escape. Ryan said he had to work again, which didn't surprise me anymore, so I went alone, and maybe that's why they felt comfortable enough to talk more freely, maybe they thought I still knew nothing. At first it was small things, weird looks between them, sentences that stopped halfway when I entered the room, my sister suddenly changing the topic too fast, and that same cold pebble feeling returned to my chest, because I had learned to trust my instincts now, and when people act strange, there's usually a reason. While my mom washed dishes, Emily helped me fold some baby blankets in the living room, and she kept glancing at me like she wanted to say something, biting her lip, nervous, and finally I asked, "What's wrong with you today?" Trying to sound light, but my voice came out sharper than I meant. She hesitated for a long time, then said, "Nothing, you seem tired," and I stared at her and said, "Emily, just say it," because suddenly I couldn't stand the pretending anymore. She sat down next to me and lowered her voice like we were sharing a secret, and what she said next made my ears ring. She told me she had seen Ryan a few months ago at a cafe in Seattle with another woman, that they looked too close, that they were holding hands across the table, and she thought it was weird but didn't want to upset me, so she told Mom instead, and my heart started pounding so hard I thought I might faint, because that meant this wasn't new, this had been going on for months. While I was smiling and planning a nursery, I asked very slowly, "So, you both knew?" And she looked down at her hands and nodded, and said, "We didn't know for sure, we didn't want to stress you during the pregnancy, we thought maybe it was nothing, or maybe he'd stop," and every word felt like another slap, because they had decided for me, decided what I could handle, decided to protect my feelings by lying, just like Ryan did. My mom came in and tried to explain, saying things like, "We didn't want you to worry," and "You needed to stay calm for the baby," and "Maybe we misunderstood," but all I heard was that everyone else had seen the truth while I was the only idiot smiling in the dark, trusting my husband, trusting my own family, and suddenly I felt so alone I could barely breathe, like the ground under me wasn't real anymore. I wasn't even angry at first, just hurt, deeply hurt, because if your own mother can hide something like this from you, who can you trust? I stood up slowly, my back aching, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall, and I said, "You should have told me. I deserve to know," and my voice sounded calm but empty, like it belonged to someone else. When I walked out of that house and got into my car, I sat there gripping the steering wheel for a long time, staring straight ahead, and it hit me that the life I thought I had wasn't just cracked, it had been fake for months, maybe longer, like everyone else was reading the real story while I only got the edited version, and something inside me finally broke for good, not into pieces, but into something harder, stronger, because if even my own family couldn't protect me, then I would have to protect myself and my son, no matter what it cost. That night I didn't cry anymore, which scared me more than all the tears before, because crying at least meant I was soft and human, but now I just felt quiet and focused, like something inside me had switched off, and when I walked into the house and saw Ryan's shoes by the door and his jacket on the chair, I didn't feel love or anger, just distance, like I was looking at a stranger's things in a hotel room. He called out, "Hey, you're back early," in that same warm voice he always used, and I answered normally, asked about his day, even smiled a little, and it surprised me how easy it was to pretend, how quickly I had learned to hide my feelings the way he did, and I wondered if this was how lies started, small and smooth and simple. While he talked about work, I watched him and thought, you really think I'm still the same woman, you really think I don't know anything, and that thought gave me a strange kind of power. After dinner, while he showered, I opened my laptop and finally called one of the lawyers I had saved earlier in the week, and my hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone, but when a calm female voice answered and said, "Law Office of Carter and Mills, how can I help you?" Something inside me straightened, and I heard myself say, very clearly, "Hi, I'd like to ask about divorce and custody options." And saying those words out loud felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying but also honest. Like I had finally stopped lying to myself. She spoke gently, asked simple questions, told me about consultations and documents and what I should start gathering, bank records, phone logs, proof of income, and I wrote everything down carefully like it was homework, like my future depended on getting every detail right, which it probably did. Later I went into the bedroom and looked at the small crib we had built together, my hand resting on the smooth wood, and I imagined raising Noah alone in a tiny apartment, tired and broke and scared, but then I imagined staying with Ryan, always wondering where he was, always checking his phone, always doubting myself, and that future felt much darker, much smaller, like slowly disappearing, and I knew which fear I could live with. I lay down beside him that night and listened to his breathing, and instead of hoping he would hold me, I quietly planned my exit, step by step, money, lawyer, place to live, like I was drawing a map out of a burning building, and for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel helpless, I felt ready. The baby came earlier than expected, on a cold gray morning when the sky looked heavy with rain and my lower back had been aching since dawn. A deep slow pain that at first I tried to ignore because I thought it was just another false alarm, but then the cramps grew sharper and closer together, wrapping around my stomach like a tight belt, and I knew this was it. This was the day Noah would finally arrive, and for one strange second everything else disappeared. The cheating, the lies, the lawyer, all of it, because nothing feels bigger than labor pain, nothing leaves space for anything else. Ryan drove me to the hospital, one hand on the steering wheel and the other on my knee, acting nervous and excited like any first-time dad, and if someone had filmed us from outside, we would have looked perfect, a happy couple about to meet their child, and that fake picture almost made me laugh between contractions, because only I knew how broken we really were. He kept saying, "You're doing great, babe, I'm here," and every time he called me babe it sounded wrong, like a word he had copied and pasted from somewhere else. Labor was long and messy and painful in a way I can't fully explain, hours of bright lights and nurses' voices and machines beeping, my body shaking, sweat on my skin, my fingers gripping the bed rails, and through it all I focused on one thing only, meeting my son, because he was the only pure thing left in my life. When Noah finally cried for the first time, loud and angry and alive, something inside my chest broke open in the best way, and they placed him on my chest, warm and tiny and perfect, his little fingers curling against my skin, and I started crying so hard I could barely breathe, because in that moment I didn't feel abandoned or betrayed or scared, I just felt like a mother, like nothing else mattered. I whispered, "Hi, Noah, it's Mommy," over and over, and I promised him silently that I would protect him from everything, even from his own father if I had to. Ryan cried too, took pictures, kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and I let him say it, but inside I felt distant, like we were standing on two different planets, because while he saw this as the start of our family, I saw it as the beginning of our goodbye. 2 weeks later, while my body still ached and I could barely sleep and every step hurt, I signed the divorce papers with shaking hands, Noah sleeping in his carrier beside me, and the pen felt heavier than anything I had ever held, but also strangely right, like I was finally choosing myself and my child instead of a man who had already chosen someone else. I walked out of that office exhausted, scared, and heartbroken, but also free in a small quiet way, like the first breath after being underwater too long. The first months after I left Ryan were the darkest and the quietest of my life, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears at night when the baby finally sleeps and you're alone with your thoughts, and sometimes I would sit on the floor of my tiny one-bedroom apartment in Bellevue, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and folded baby clothes, and wonder how everything had changed so fast, how I went from a married woman with a house and a husband to a single mother counting every dollar, but at the same time there was a strange peace in that small space, because for the first time in a long while there were no lies inside those walls. The apartment was old and a little cold, the heater noisy, the kitchen barely big enough for one person, but it was mine, and every night Noah slept in his crib next to my bed, making soft little sounds, and even when I was exhausted, even when my body still hurt from birth and my eyes burned from lack of sleep, I would look at him and feel something stronger than fear, something steady that kept me going. I learned how to do everything alone, how to rock him with one arm while answering work emails with the other, how to heat soup at 3 a.m., how to cry quietly so I wouldn't wake him, and during the day I took freelance cataloging jobs and remote library work while he napped, saving every cent, building a new life piece by piece like stacking books on a shelf. Slowly, things got better. I got a small promotion at the library because my manager said I was surprisingly strong under pressure, and if only she knew, I almost laughed, because pressure had become my whole world. My body healed, my steps felt lighter, and when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the scared pregnant woman anymore. I saw someone sharper, someone who had survived something ugly and was still standing. Meanwhile, Ryan's messages started coming, first polite, then desperate, long texts about mistakes and regret and how Lauren had left him and how he missed his family, and every time my phone buzzed with his name, I felt nothing but tiredness, like reading an old story I had already finished. Months later we met at a park so he could see Noah, and he looked thinner, older, his confidence gone, and when he said, with tears in his eyes, "I ruined everything, I ruined our family," I believed him because he had, but not in the way he thought. He expected me to break, to forgive, maybe even to come back, but I just stood there calm and said, "The past is over, Ryan," and my voice didn't shake at all, and when he dropped to his knees crying, I didn't feel powerful or cruel, just free. As I walked away pushing Noah's stroller under the soft autumn trees, the same red and orange leaves falling around us like the year before, I realized something simple and clear, that one message on his phone hadn't destroyed my life like I first thought, it had saved me, because it pulled me out of a marriage where I was small and blind and turned me into someone who could stand on her own feet. I wasn't the abandoned woman anymore, I was a mother, a worker, a survivor, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of the future, because whatever came next, it would be honest, and it would be mine. And if you've listened this far, thank you for being here with me, for sharing this piece of my story. It means more than you know. If this story touched you in any way, you can like the video or subscribe for more stories like mine. And if you've ever gone through something similar, I'd love to read your story too. You're not alone.